The stagecoach rattled into Silver City, New Mexico territory, on a dusty afternoon in June of 1878, carrying a woman who had exactly $3 to her name and debts totaling more than she could earn in 5 years. Jessica Vaughn pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the weathered building slide past as her heart hammered against her ribs. 22 years old, educated enough to read and write beautifully, but poor enough that marriage to a stranger had seemed like her only escape from the brothel her stepfather had threatened to sell her into after her mother died. The advertisement had promised a respectable rancher seeking a wife, a man of means who wanted companionship more than a servant. What it had not mentioned was that her stepfather would find her before she left Philadelphia, would corner her at the train station with 2 large men who claimed she owed them money for her mother's medical bills and funeral expenses. Bills she had never seen, debts she had never agreed to pay. But they had papers, forged or not, and they had fists, and they had made it clear that one way or another she would pay. So she had signed another paper, promising to send them $800 within 6 months, or they would come for her wherever she was. They had smiled when she signed, knowing full well what they were doing, knowing she had no way to earn such a sum honestly, knowing exactly what business she would be forced into. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside a modest hotel, and Jessica gathered her single-worn carpetbag, smoothing down her best dress, which was a faded blue calico that had seen better years. Her hands shook as she climbed down, her legs unsteady after days of travel. The driver handed down her bag without ceremony, already turning to the next passenger. "Miss Vaughn." A deep voice cut through the dusty air. She turned and felt her breath catch. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of aged whiskey beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. He looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, with strong features that spoke of both kindness and hard work. This was Garrett Graham, the rancher who had advertised for a wife, though the reality of him was far different from what she had imagined during the long journey west. "Mr. Graham." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He removed his hat, revealing dark brown hair that needed cutting. "Yes, madam. Welcome to Silver City." His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. "You look tired. The hotel has a room where you can rest and freshen up before we talk." "Talk." The word came out sharper than she meant. "About the arrangement. About whether you want to go through with this." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I know this is not the usual way people get married. Figured you might want some time to decide if I am someone you can tolerate." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She had expected demands, expectations, perhaps even cruelty, not this gentle consideration. "That is very thoughtful. I will be at the Silver Star Saloon across the street. Not drinking," he added quickly. "Just having supper. When you are ready, come find me. Take your time." He handed her a key and a few bills. "For the room and a meal if you want to eat alone." Jessica watched him walk away, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust, and felt something twist in her chest. Guilt, perhaps. Because she was about to trap this decent man in a marriage to a woman who came with dangerous debts and dangerous men who would eventually come calling. The hotel room was small but clean, with a bed that looked softer than anything she had slept on in months. Jessica sat on the edge of it and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes, allowing herself that weakness before she washed her face in the basin, changed into her only other dress, a dark green one with buttons up the front, and tried to make herself presentable. She could run. Take the money he had given her and disappear into the vastness of the West. But where would she go? And how long before those men found her? At least here, as a married woman, she would have some protection, some legitimacy. And maybe, if she was very careful, she could find a way to earn the money without her new husband ever knowing about the debt. The Silver Star Saloon was noisy but not rowdy when she entered an hour later. Men sat at tables playing cards, drinking beer, talking in low voices about cattle prices and water rights. Garrett sat alone at a corner table, and he stood immediately when he saw her, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." He waited until she sat before settling back down. "I ordered stew. Hope that is all right." "That is fine." She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. A woman brought 2 bowls of beef stew with thick slices of bread, and Jessica realized she was starving. She forced herself to eat slowly, aware of Garrett watching her with those thoughtful eyes. "I should tell you about myself," he said after a few moments. "So you know what you would be getting into. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Not huge, but big enough to make a living. I run cattle mostly, have about 200 head right now. The house is decent, 2 bedrooms, needs a woman's touch, but it is sturdy and keeps out the weather. I have a hand who helps with the heavy work. Miguel, good man, lives in the bunkhouse on the property." Jessica nodded, swallowing a mouthful of stew. "I am not a rich man," Garrett continued, his voice steady, "but I am not poor either. I can provide for a wife, keep her comfortable and safe. I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble, and I do not raise my hand to women or animals." He paused, his jaw tightening. "My mother raised me better than that before she passed. Why do you need a mail-order bride?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "A man like you could find a wife here, surely." He smiled slightly, a sad expression that did not quite reach his eyes. "Not many unmarried women in Silver City, and the ones that are here have known me since I was a boy. Hard to see someone romantic when you remember them falling off their horse into a water trough at age 12. He shrugged. "And I am not good at courting, at saying pretty words." Figured this way, everything would be clear from the start, a partnership, an arrangement that benefits us both. "And what would you expect from me?" Jessica's heart pounded. "Companionship, mainly. Someone to share the load of running a household. Cooking, mending, maybe helping with the garden." "I would not expect." He cleared his throat, color rising in his tanned cheeks. "I would not expect marital relations until you were ready and willing. We could start as partners and see what develops." The relief that flooded through her was almost painful. "That is very respectful of you." "Like I said, my mother raised me right." He studied her for a long moment. "Your turn. Tell me about yourself." So she did, carefully editing the truth. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother's death, about wanting a fresh start in the West. She did not mention her stepfather or the debts, or the 2 men with hard eyes who had made it clear they would collect one way or another. They talked through the meal and into the evening, the conversation growing easier as the minutes passed. Garrett told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand, about the challenges of water and weather and cattle rustlers. Jessica found herself relaxing despite her circumstances, drawn to his quiet competence and gentle humor. "So," he said finally, as the saloon began to empty, "what do you think? Can you see yourself married to a cowboy like me?" Jessica looked at this man who had shown her more kindness in 3 hours than she had known in the last year and felt her throat tighten. "Yes," she said softly, "I think I can." The wedding took place the next morning at the small church on the edge of town, with the preacher's wife and Miguel as witnesses. Jessica wore her green dress with a handful of wildflowers Miguel had picked, and Garrett wore his cleanest shirt and a string tie. The ceremony was brief and simple, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Garrett kissed her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to cry. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Graham," he said quietly, and she heard the hope in his voice. They rode to the ranch in Garrett's wagon, the late morning sun beating down on them as they followed a rutted road into rolling hills, covered with scrub grass and scattered cattle. Jessica tried to memorize everything, this landscape so different from the cobblestone streets and brick buildings of Philadelphia. The ranch house was exactly as Garrett had described, a sturdy wooden structure with a covered porch and windows that faced the morning sun. Inside, it was clean but sparse, with furniture that looked handmade and serviceable. The kitchen had a good iron stove, the bedroom had a large bed with a patchwork quilt, and everywhere she looked, Jessica saw potential. "The second bedroom is through there," Garrett said, pointing. "I have been sleeping there for a few weeks, getting it ready for you. Figured you would want the larger room at least until you got comfortable with everything. More kindness, more consideration." Jessica felt the weight of her deception growing heavier. "You do not have to do that. I want to." He set her bag down carefully. "Listen, Jessica, I know this is strange and new. Take your time settling in. I have work to do outside, cattle to check on. Make yourself at home, look around, arrange things how you like them. This is your house now, too." He left her there, and Jessica stood in the center of the main room, surrounded by her new life, and wondered how long it would be before everything fell apart. The first week passed in a blur of domestic routines. Jessica threw herself into making the house a home, scrubbing floors, washing curtains, organizing the kitchen. She cooked meals for Garrett and Miguel, learning to work with the supplies available, adjusting recipes she had learned from her mother to the ingredients of the West. Garrett praised everything she made, even the biscuits that came out harder than rocks the first time. And slowly, carefully, they began to know each other. He was patient and kind, never pushing, never demanding more than she was ready to give. They talked over meals about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on this land, about his father who had died of fever 3 years ago, about his dreams of building the ranch into something that would last generations. She told him carefully edited stories about Philadelphia, about books she had read, about the world beyond Silver City. At night, they retired to separate bedrooms, but sometimes Jessica would hear Garrett moving around in the other room and wonder what it would be like to not be alone, to trust someone enough to share not just a house but a life. Miguel proved to be a friendly presence, a man in his 40s with a quick smile and stories about cattle drives and wild horses. He treated Jessica with respect and seemed genuinely pleased that Garrett had found a wife. "He is a good man," Miguel told her one afternoon while she was hanging laundry. "Been alone too long since his father passed, needs someone to share the load. He seems very capable on his own," Jessica said carefully. "Capable, yes, but lonely." Miguel adjusted his hat against the sun. "A ranch is not just work. It is a life. Better with 2 people." Jessica thought about that as she pinned sheets to the line, watching them billow in the hot wind. She had been so focused on her own problems that she had not fully considered what Garrett might need from this arrangement. He had offered her safety and security, but what was she offering him besides cooking and cleaning? That evening, after supper, Garrett invited her to walk with him to check on the cattle in the near pasture. Jessica agreed, grateful for the cooler evening air after the heat of the day. They walked in comfortable silence at first, boots crunching on the dry grass, until they reached a small rise overlooking the grazing herd. "This was my father's favorite spot," Garrett said, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "He used to say you could see the whole world from here, even though it is really just a few hundred acres of New Mexico dirt." Jessica smiled. "It is beautiful, though, all this open space, the sky going on forever, very different from the city. Do you miss it?" Philadelphia? No. The answer came without hesitation. There is nothing for me there anymore. Family, she hesitated, weighing truth against deception. My stepfather, we are not close. Garrett was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "If you ever want to talk about why you really left, I will listen." No judgment, her heart stuttered. "What do you mean, Jessica? You startle every time someone rides up to the house. You watch the road like you are expecting trouble, and sometimes at night I hear you pacing in your room." He turned to face her fully, his expression gentle. "I am not asking you to tell me your secrets. I am just saying that if you need help, I am here. That is what marriage means, even one that started like ours. We are partners now." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. She wanted so badly to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the fear that woke her up sweating in the night. But how could she drag him into her problems? He had done nothing but show her respect and consideration. She could not repay that by bringing dangerous men to his doorstep. "Thank you," she said instead. "That means more than you know." He nodded, accepting her non-answer, and they walked back to the house as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red across the western horizon. 3 weeks into the marriage, a rider came to the ranch just before noon. Jessica was in the kitchen making bread when she heard the hoofbeats and looked out to see a stranger dismounting in the yard. Her blood turned to ice. He was not one of the men from Philadelphia, but he had that same hard look, the same air of barely contained violence. Garrett came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants, and spoke with the man for several minutes. Jessica could not hear the words, but she saw Garrett shake his head, saw the stranger's aggressive posture. Then Garrett said something else, and the man mounted up and rode away fast, kicking up dust. When Garrett came inside, his expression was troubled. "Do you know a man named Frank Dalton?" Jessica's hands froze in the bread dough. "No, should I?" He was asking after a Jessica Vaughn from Philadelphia. Said he was looking for a woman who owed some people money. Garrett's eyes searched her face. "I told him I did not know anyone by that name, that my wife's name is Jessica Graham, and she came from Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia specifically." He seemed to believe me, but Jessica. He paused. "Is there something you need to tell me?" The bread dough blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had known this moment would come, but she had not expected it so soon, had not expected to care so much about this man's opinion of her. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." And then the whole story came pouring out. Her mother's death, the stepfather who had sold her future to cover his gambling debts, the forged papers, the threats, the impossible sum of $800 she had 6 months to produce. She told him everything except the most shameful part, that she had married him knowing she was bringing danger to his door. Garrett listened without interrupting, his face growing harder as the story unfolded. When she finally fell silent, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the empty yard. $800, he said finally. "I know it is a fortune. I know there is no way to earn it honestly, not in time. That is what they were counting on." Her voice broke. "I thought maybe I could find a way, or maybe they would not be able to find me out here. I did not know what else to do. And you were afraid to tell me because you thought I would send you back. I thought you would be angry. You should be angry. I deceived you." He turned to look at her then, and his expression was not what she expected. He did not look angry. He looked sad and determined, and something else she could not quite name. "How much time do you have left?" 5 months, roughly. Garrett nodded slowly, then walked to the shelf where he kept his important papers in a metal box. He unlocked it, pulled out a leather pouch, and counted out bills onto the table. Jessica watched in confusion as the pile grew. "What are you doing?" $800. He looked up at her. "This is what I have been saving to buy more cattle in the fall, but cattle can wait." "No." The word came out fierce. "No, Garrett, I cannot take your savings. That is your future, your ranch. You are my wife. That makes you my future too." He pushed the money toward her. "We will send this to Philadelphia, pay off your debt, and be done with it." "I cannot let you do this." "It is not about letting me, Jessica. It is about doing what is right." He moved around the table until he was standing in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Those men had no right to sell you into debt for charges you did not incur. They were counting on you being desperate and alone. But you are not alone anymore. You have me, and I will not let anyone hurt you or force you into something horrible to pay off fraudulent debts." "But $800, Garrett, that is so much money." "It is just money. I can earn it back. What I cannot do is stand by and let my wife live in fear, looking over her shoulder, waiting for men like that Frank Dalton to come back." His voice softened. "You are worth more than any herd of cattle, Jessica. Surely you know that." The tears spilled over then, running hot down her cheeks. No one had ever valued her like this, had ever put her well-being above their own interests. "I do not deserve this. I do not deserve you." "That is not true." He reached up hesitantly, then gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "You deserve safety and respect and a chance at a good life. That is all any person deserves. How can I ever repay you? You do not owe me anything." His hand lingered on her cheek, warm and calloused from work. "That is the whole point, Jessica. I am paying this debt so you will owe nobody nothing. Not them and not me. You will be free." Something shifted in her chest, a wall she had built around her heart beginning to crack. This man, this kind, strong, impossibly decent man, was offering her not just rescue but freedom. No strings attached, no new obligations to replace the old ones. Just pure, simple generosity. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Garrett's expression was tender as he looked at her, his thumb still tracing her cheekbone. "Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, you stopped being a convenient arrangement and started being someone I care about. Because I hate the thought of anyone hurting you. And because this is what family does. We take care of each other." Jessica closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, feeling something warm and fragile blooming inside her. "I am beginning to care about you too," she admitted. "More than I expected to." "Good." She could hear the smile in his voice. "That makes what I am about to do much easier." She opened her eyes. "What are you about to do?" "Go into town and send a telegram to those men in Philadelphia. Tell them the debt is paid in full, and they are to have no further contact with Jessica Graham, wife of Garrett Graham of Silver City, New Mexico Territory. And then I am going to have a conversation with the sheriff. Make sure he knows about Frank Dalton and anyone else who might come around asking questions. You would do all that today, right now, in fact. The sooner this is handled, the sooner you can stop looking over your shoulder." He stepped back reluctantly, as if he did not want to break the contact. "Will you be all right here while I am gone? Miguel is working the south pasture, but he can come back if you need him." "I will be fine." She felt steadier than she had in months. "Garrett," he turned at the door. "Thank you for everything, for believing me, for helping me, for not judging me." His smile was warm and genuine. "That is what husbands are for, I hope." After he left, Jessica stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the bread dough she had forgotten, feeling the warmth of where his hand had touched her face. Something was changing between them, something deeper than partnership or convenience. She was beginning to understand what it meant to be cherished, to be valued not for what she could provide but simply for who she was. It terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. Garrett returned as the sun was setting, looking tired but satisfied. "It is done. The money has been sent, the telegram delivered. I spoke with Sheriff Morrison, told him the whole story. He said if anyone comes around bothering you, he will handle it personally. Jessica had dinner waiting, a stew with vegetables from the garden and biscuits that had actually turned out well this time. They ate together in the kitchen, the conversation quieter than usual, weighted with things unspoken. The telegram office said it would take a few weeks for confirmation, Garrett said, sopping up gravy with a piece of biscuit. But once they receive the money and sign off on the debt being settled, they will send word back. Then it will be truly over. I still cannot believe you did that. $800 just like that. I meant what I said, Jessica. You owe me nothing. This is not a new debt replacing the old one. You are free to stay or go as you please to make your own choices. She set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. Is that what you think? That I would leave? I do not know what to think. We have been married less than a month, and it was supposed to be an arrangement of convenience. I would understand if you wanted something different now that you are not trapped by debt. And what do you want? The question hung in the air between them. Garrett was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, I want you to stay, not because you feel obligated, but because you want to, because you see a future here with me. He met her eyes across the table. But only if that is what you want too. Jessica thought about the last 3 weeks, about the quiet contentment of working side by side, of learning his habits and quirks, of the way he made her laugh with his dry humor. She thought about how safe she felt here, how valued. And she thought about the way her heart had jumped when he had touched her face, the warmth that had spread through her at his gentleness. I want to stay, she said softly. I want to build a life here with you. A real marriage, not just an arrangement. The hope that lit up his face was almost painful to see. You mean that? I mean it. She reached across the table and he took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. I know we started this backward, but maybe that is all right. Maybe we can figure it out as we go. I would like that very much. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. We can take our time, let things develop naturally, no rushing, no pressure. But even as he said it, Jessica felt something urgent and insistent rising in her chest. This man had saved her, had valued her, had shown her what true kindness looked like. And somewhere in the midst of all that, she had started to fall in love with him. Garrett, she said hesitantly, what if I do not want to take our time? His hand stilled on hers. What do you mean? I mean we are married, we care about each other, and I do not want to sleep in separate rooms anymore, wondering what it would be like to not be alone. She felt heat rise in her cheeks but pushed on. Unless you would rather wait, of course. I do not want to presume. Jessica. Her name came out rough, almost pained. Are you sure? I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything because of what I did today. That is not what this is about. She stood and walked around the table to stand in front of him. This is about me wanting my husband. Wanting to start our real life together. Is that something you want too? In answer, he stood and pulled her gently into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heart beating fast against his chest. I have wanted that since the day you stepped off the stage, coach, he admitted quietly. But I was afraid to push, afraid to make you feel trapped. I do not feel trapped. I feel like I finally found home. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his expression tender and uncertain. I am not good at pretty words, Jessica. I do not know how to court you properly. You already did, you just did it backward. You showed me respect and kindness and what it means to be valued. That is better than any pretty words. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble beneath her palm. Now show me what it means to be loved. He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms wrapping around his neck. It was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding. This was heat and promise and the beginning of something real. They moved to the bedroom together. Garrett pausing every few moments to make sure she was certain, to give her chances to change her mind. But Jessica was sure. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she knew exactly what she wanted. That night, they became husband and wife in truth, learning each other in the lamplight, trading touches and whispered words and the kind of intimacy that comes from trust. Garrett was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally came together, Jessica felt something inside her heal, some wounded part of her soul knitting itself back together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Jessica's head on Garrett's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her back. "Better than all right." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "I feel like I can breathe for the first time in a year." "Good." He tightened his arms around her. "That is all I want, Jessica, for you to be happy and safe and free to be yourself." "I love you," she said, the words surprising her even as they left her mouth, but they were true, she realized. Somewhere in the chaos of the last month, she had fallen completely in love with this cowboy who had saved her without asking for anything in return. She felt him go still beneath her, then heard the catch in his breath. "Say that again." "I love you, Garrett Graham." "I do not know exactly when it happened, but it is true." He rolled them over so he could look down at her face, his expression fierce and tender at once. "I love you too. Have for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you would think I was trying to manipulate you or make you feel obligated." "Never." She pulled him down for another kiss. "You have given me everything and asked for nothing. That is not manipulation. That is love." They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss, building something between them that was stronger than convenience or circumstance. This was real and solid and theirs. The weeks that followed were the happiest Jessica had ever known. She and Garrett fell into a comfortable rhythm, working the ranch together, planning for the future, learning to be married in all the ways that mattered. The physical intimacy between them grew deeper and more natural, a language of its own that they spoke in the darkness of their shared bedroom. Miguel noticed the change and smiled knowingly, but said nothing except to comment that Garrett seemed lighter somehow, younger. "Love is good for him," he told Jessica one afternoon. "Good for both of you." The telegram came 5 weeks after Garrett had sent the money, confirming that the debt had been paid in full and all claims against Jessica Vaughn were considered satisfied. The men in Philadelphia had signed papers releasing her from any further obligation. Jessica read the telegram 3 times, hardly daring to believe it was real. She was free, truly, completely free. "Now you owe me nothing," Garrett said, reading over her shoulder, "just like I promised." She turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I owe you everything. My life, my happiness, my future." "No," he kissed her forehead. "Those things are yours. You do not owe them to anyone, but if you want to share them with me, I would be honored. I want to share everything with you. Today, tomorrow, all the years we have. Then that is what we will do." He held her close and Jessica felt the last of her fear drain away. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. Summer turned to fall and the ranch thrived under their combined care. Jessica proved to have a knack for the business side of things, keeping accounts and negotiating prices when buyers came to look at cattle. Garrett deferred to her judgment often, trusting her instincts, and together they made decisions about the future of the ranch. They talked about expanding, about building a bigger house someday, about all the possibilities that stretched before them. But mostly they just enjoyed being together, finding joy in the small moments that made up a life. One evening in late September, Jessica realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Garrett over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor." She twisted her napkin in her lap, suddenly nervous. "I know we have not talked about children yet. Is it too soon? Too soon?" He set down the cup and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands. "Jessica, are you joking? This is the best news I have heard since you said you loved me." The relief that flooded through her made her dizzy. "You are happy about it." "Happy does not begin to cover it." He pressed his forehead against hers. "You have given me so much already. Now you are giving me a family." How could I be anything but overjoyed? They rode into town the next day to see the doctor, who confirmed what Jessica already knew. She was pregnant, probably about 6 weeks along, and if all went well, they could expect a baby in late April or early May. Dr. Henderson, a kindly man in his 50s who had practiced medicine in Silver City for 20 years, gave Jessica instructions on caring for herself and told Garrett to make sure she did not overwork. "She is not fragile," Garrett protested mildly. "She runs a ranch, and she will continue to do so within reason. But no heavy lifting, and she needs to rest when she is tired. Growing a baby is hard work." The doctor smiled at Jessica. "You look healthy and strong. I do not anticipate any problems, but I want to see you once a month until the baby comes." They celebrated with dinner at the hotel restaurant, the nicest place in Silver City, though it was still pretty modest by Eastern standards. Jessica did not care. She was with the man she loved, carrying his child, living a life she had not dared to dream of a few months ago. "I want it to be a boy," Garrett said as they walked home in the cool evening air. "A son to teach about ranching and cattle and how to treat people with respect." "What if it is a girl?" "Then I will have a daughter to spoil and protect and teach about ranching and cattle and how to demand respect." He grinned. "Either way works for me," Jessica laughed, leaning into his side as they walked. "You will be a good father." "I hope so. My own father was a good man. I want to live up to that." He paused at the edge of town, looking out at the darkening landscape. "I want to build something that lasts, Jessica. Not just a ranch, but a legacy. A place where our children and grandchildren can grow up safe and loved and free." "We will," she promised. "Together, we will build that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Jessica's belly grew round, and Garrett became almost comically protective, insisting she sit down every time she looked tired, bringing her water, making sure she ate enough. It was sweet and occasionally frustrating, but Jessica appreciated the care even when she protested that she was fine. Miguel helped pick up the slack on the ranch, and they hired another hand for the winter, a young man named Tom who was eager to learn and did not mind hard work. The cattle weathered the winter well, and by spring, the herd had grown to nearly 250 head. Jessica spent the quiet winter evenings sewing baby clothes and blankets, her hands busy while Garrett read aloud from the newspaper or books borrowed from the small library in town. They talked about names, about how they would arrange the house, about the future that was rapidly approaching. In early April, Jessica woke in the middle of the night with a pain that took her breath away. She knew immediately what it meant and woke Garrett, trying not to panic. "It is time," she said, gripping his hand as another contraction rolled through her. He went pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. "But it is too early. The doctor said late April or early May. Babies come when they are ready, not when it is convenient." She managed a smile despite the pain. "You need to ride for Dr. Henderson." Garrett moved fast, pulling on clothes and boots, then hesitated at the door. "I do not want to leave you." "I will be fine for an hour. Miguel is in the bunkhouse if I need anything, but Garrett, you need to hurry." He rode out into the darkness, and Jessica tried to stay calm through the contractions that were coming faster now. Miguel's wife, Rosa, who had moved into the bunkhouse with him over the winter, came to help when she heard the commotion, bringing water and clean cloths and a calm presence that Jessica desperately needed. "First babies take time," Rosa said soothingly, helping Jessica into a clean nightgown. "My first took 18 hours. You breathe through the pain, and soon you will hold your little one." Garrett returned with Dr. Henderson as dawn was breaking, and the doctor took charge with the easy competence of a man who had delivered hundreds of babies. He examined Jessica and pronounced that everything was progressing normally, though it would likely be several more hours. Garrett stayed by her side through it all, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement when the pain got bad. Jessica had never loved him more than in those hours when he stayed strong for her, never flinching even when she crushed his hand during the worst contractions. Finally, in the early afternoon, after hours of labor, Jessica felt the overwhelming urge to push. Dr. Henderson positioned her properly, and with Garrett supporting her from behind, she bore down with everything she had. "That is it, keep going, I can see the head," the doctor encouraged. "One more good push." Jessica gathered her remaining strength and pushed with all her might, feeling the baby slide free in a rush of relief and pain. A thin cry filled the room, and she collapsed back against Garrett, gasping. "It is a boy, doctor," Henderson announced, quickly checking the baby over before wrapping him in a blanket and placing him on Jessica's chest. "A healthy, strong boy. Congratulations." Jessica looked down at the tiny face, at the shock of dark hair and the eyes that seemed to stare up at her with solemn awareness, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He really is." Garrett's voice was thick with emotion as he looked over her shoulder at their son. "Look at him, Jessica. We made that." They named him James after Garrett's father and settled into the chaotic joy of new parenthood. James was a healthy baby with a good set of lungs, and those first weeks were a blur of feeding and changing and trying to sleep whenever the baby slept. Garrett proved to be a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring James to Jessica for feeding, walking the floor with him when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Jessica watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. Miguel and Rosa were delighted with the baby, and Rosa proved invaluable in teaching Jessica the practical aspects of baby care that her Philadelphia upbringing had not covered. The ranch became a place of laughter and life, and Jessica could hardly remember the scared, desperate woman who had stepped off the stagecoach less than a year ago. One evening in late summer, when James was nearly 4 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Jessica and Garrett sat on the porch watching the sunset. She was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them savoring the quiet moment. "Do you ever think about how we started?" Jessica asked. "How impossible all this seemed?" "I think about it often." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I think about how close I came to not placing that advertisement, to just resigning myself to being alone. And then I think about what my life would be like without you and James, and I cannot imagine it. I think about getting off that stagecoach, terrified and in debt and convinced my life was over. And then you were there, being kind when you had no reason to be." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You saved me, Garrett, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to build something bigger than just a ranch. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future worth working toward. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I know the feeling." He kissed her properly this time, slow and sweet. "But we do not have to be scared. We have each other and we have James and we have all the time in the world to build the life we want. You want more children?" The question had been on her mind for weeks. "Eventually, yes, but only when you are ready. There is no rush." "I think I would like that. Maybe in a year or two, a brother or sister for James." "Sounds perfect." He pulled her closer. "Everything about this life with you is perfect." The years rolled by with the comfortable rhythm of ranch life. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about horses and cattle and everything in between. Jessica found herself pregnant again when James was 3, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Garrett's mother. Grace proved to have her mother's dark hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she was determined to keep up with her older brother. The ranch house echoed with the sound of children's laughter and running feet, and Jessica's heart was full in ways she had never imagined possible. They expanded the ranch as planned, adding more cattle and eventually some horses that Garrett thought might be profitable. Jessica's business acumen proved invaluable, and the ranch prospered under their combined management. They built a new, larger house when Grace was 2, with enough bedrooms for the children and any future additions to the family. Miguel and Rosa stayed on, becoming like family themselves, their own children playing with James and Grace. The ranch was no longer just a business but a community, a place where people looked out for each other and shared in both the work and the rewards. When James was 7 and Grace was 4, Jessica found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her tired and sick for the first few months, but Dr. Henderson assured her everything was progressing normally. "Third babies sometimes do this," he said during one of her monthly checkups. "But your heartbeat is strong, and you are healthy overall. Just rest when you need to." Garrett was even more protective during this pregnancy, barely letting Jessica lift a finger. She protested that she was not made of glass, but secretly, she appreciated his care. Being pregnant at 30 years old was different from being pregnant at 23, and she was grateful for the help. Their third child, a boy they named Samuel, was born on a snowy February morning, coming so fast that Dr. Henderson barely made it in time. Samuel was smaller than his siblings had been but equally healthy, with his mother's delicate features and an immediate loud objection to the cold world he had just entered. 3 children, Garrett said wonderingly that night, holding Samuel while Jessica rested. James and Grace were sleeping in the next room, worn out from the excitement of meeting their new brother. "We have 3 perfect children and a life I did not dare dream of 10 years ago." "Neither did I." Jessica smiled tiredly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real. That I get to have this life with you. It is real, and you deserve every bit of it." He came to sit beside her on the bed, careful not to jostle her. "You built this life as much as I did, Jessica. None of this would exist without your hard work and determination and love." She leaned against him, looking at their newest son's sleeping face. "We did it together. That is what made it work." As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. James showed an early aptitude for handling animals and spent every spare moment learning from his father and Miguel. Grace was more interested in the business side, often sitting with Jessica while she went over the accounts, asking questions about prices and profit margins that showed a sharp mind for numbers. Samuel was quieter than his siblings, more thoughtful, often found with his nose in a book or watching the world around him with serious eyes. Jessica saw pieces of herself in him, that tendency to observe and think before acting, and she made sure to nurture his contemplative nature even as she encouraged him to keep up with his more boisterous siblings. The debt that had once defined Jessica's life became nothing more than a distant memory, a shadow from a past life that had no bearing on her present. The men from Philadelphia never came looking for her. Frank Dalton never returned to Silver City. Jessica Graham was not the same person as Jessica Vaughn, and the life she had built was unshakable in its foundation of love and mutual respect. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised Jessica by taking her into town for dinner and dancing at the new community hall that had been built the previous year. Rosa agreed to watch the children, and for one evening, Jessica and Garrett were not parents or ranchers but simply a man and woman in love. "Do you remember our wedding?" Garrett asked as they danced to a waltz, his hand warm on her waist. "I remember being terrified and hopeful, and not knowing what to expect from you. And now I know exactly what to expect, kindness and strength and love that never wavers." She smiled up at him. "You have given me 10 years of happiness, Garrett, more than I ever thought I would have. You have given me everything that matters." He pulled her closer. "My only regret is that I did not find you sooner, so we could have had more years together. We have all the years ahead of us. That is what matters." They danced until late, lost in each other, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends, living a life built on the foundation of a debt paid and love freely given. The children continued to grow. James, at 17, was nearly as tall as his father and took on more responsibility around the ranch. He had his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination, and it was clear he would someday run the ranch himself. Grace, at 14, was sharp-tongued and clever, already helping her mother with the complex business dealings that came with running a large cattle operation. She had suitors circling, drawn by her beauty and wit, but she dismissed them all as too simple, too easily impressed by a pretty face. "I want what you and Papa have," she told Jessica one evening while they were preparing supper. "Someone who sees me for who I really am, not just what I look like or how much money the ranch makes." "You will find that," Jessica assured her. "When you are ready and when the right person comes along. Do not settle for less than you deserve." Samuel, at 12, was already showing signs of the man he would become. Thoughtful and studious, he talked about maybe becoming a doctor someday, about seeing more of the world before settling down. Jessica encouraged his dreams, knowing that not all children were meant to stay on the ranch, and that was all right. Garrett's hair had started to show silver at the temples, and Jessica had laugh lines around her eyes, but they were happy with the passage of time. It meant they had survived, had built something lasting, had raised children and lived a life worth remembering. On a warm evening in their 15th year of marriage, they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over land that stretched as far as the eye could see. Their children were scattered around the property, doing chores or playing or just being young, and everything was exactly as it should be. "Do you ever miss Philadelphia?" Garrett asked, a question he had not posed in years. "Not even for a moment. That city holds nothing but bad memories." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Everything I need is right here. Even after everything we have been through, the hard times and the struggles, especially because of those things. They made us stronger. They taught us what we are capable of when we work together." She turned to look at him fully. "You told me once that I owed you nothing, but the truth is I owe you everything. My life, my happiness, our children, all of it." "No," he shook his head, smiling. "You do not owe me that. You earned that through your own strength and courage. I just gave you a safe place to land. You gave me more than that. You gave me love when I did not think I deserved it. You gave me freedom when I was trapped. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." She squeezed his hand. "So yes, I owe you everything." and I spend every day trying to repay that debt by loving you the way you deserve to be loved. Jessica. His voice was rough with emotion. You repay that debt every time you smile at me across the breakfast table, every time you share your dreams with me, every time you hold our children and give them the love and stability we both work so hard to provide. He pulled her closer. There is no debt between us. There never was. Just two people who found each other and built something beautiful. Then let us call it even. She kissed him, soft and lingering. Partners in all things, debts paid in full, nothing owed and everything shared. That sounds perfect to me. They sat together as darkness fell, comfortable in the silence, surrounded by the life they had built from nothing but faith and determination and love. Inside the house, their children were laughing about something, the sound carrying through the open windows like music. Jessica thought about the terrified young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, weighed down by impossible debts and certain her life was over. She thought about the kind cowboy who had taken one look at her and decided she was worth saving, worth investing in, worth loving. And she thought about all the years since, the struggles and the joys, the births and the growth, the building of something that would last long after they were gone. A legacy not just of land and cattle, but of love and respect, and the unshakable belief that people were worth more than money, that kindness was never wasted, that debts of the heart could only be paid with more love. I love you, she said into the darkness, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. I love you too, Garrett replied, his arm tightening around her. Today, tomorrow, and all the days we have left, and that, Jessica thought, was the only debt worth carrying. The sweet burden of loving someone so completely that every day was both a gift and a promise. She had come to Silver City with nothing but fear and desperation, and she had found everything that mattered. The ranch continued to thrive into the next generation. James married a schoolteacher from Santa Fe when he was 21, a woman with a good head for business and a genuine love for ranch life. They gave Garrett and Jessica their first grandchild 2 years later, a boy they named after his grandfather. Grace, true to her word, refused several proposals before finally accepting one from a lawyer who came to Silver City to establish a practice. He was smart enough to appreciate her sharp mind and confident enough to not be threatened by it. They built a house in town, but remained closely involved with the ranch, Grace continuing to help manage the business side as the operation grew. Samuel went east to study medicine, fulfilling the dream he had carried since boyhood. But he came home often, and eventually he returned to Silver City to practice, serving the community that had raised him. He married a nurse he met during his training, and they settled into a small house near the clinic. Garrett and Jessica watched their children build their own lives and families with pride and satisfaction. They had done what they set out to do, creating something that would last, giving their children the foundation to build their own dreams. As they grew older, they gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to James and his wife, though they remained actively involved in the decision-making. They took pride in watching the next generation take the reins, seeing their grandchildren grow up surrounded by the same love and stability they had worked so hard to create. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch, inviting everyone from Silver City and the surrounding area. The house and yard were full of people, laughter, and music. Jessica looked around at the gathering, at her children and grandchildren, at the friends and neighbors who had become like family, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "We did good," Garrett said quietly, standing beside her on the porch where they had spent so many evenings. His hair was fully silver now, and there were deep lines around his eyes, but to Jessica, he was as handsome as the day she first saw him standing in the dusty street. "We did very good," she agreed, leaning into his familiar warmth. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. It started with a leap of faith. You taking a chance on a stranger, me taking a chance on a woman I had never met. It started with you paying a debt and expecting nothing in return. That changed everything." He turned to look at her, his eyes still that same warm whiskey color that had drawn her in from the beginning. "I got everything in return, Jessica. I got you, and that was worth every penny and then some." They stood together watching their family celebrate. Two people who had started with nothing but hope and built an empire of love. The debt that had brought them together had been paid long ago, but the dividends kept paying out in the form of children and grandchildren, in the form of a life well lived and love freely shared. Years continued to pass with the gentle inevitability of time. Garrett's steps grew slower, and Jessica's hands developed arthritis that made sewing difficult, but they remained active and engaged with the ranch and their family. They spent their days watching grandchildren grow, offering advice when asked, and simply enjoying the fruit of their long labor. In their 35th year of marriage, sitting on the porch one evening as they had done thousands of times before, Garrett took Jessica's hand and said, "I need you to know something." "What is that?" She looked at him with concern, worried by the serious tone. "These 35 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life. Every single day, even the hard ones, has been worth it because I got to spend them with you." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," she said softly. "Well, maybe I would have told you I loved you sooner. We wasted precious days being cautious when we could have been loving each other. We had all the time we needed. We loved each other the way we were ready to, when we were ready to. That is what made it real. You are a wise man, Garrett Graham. I just learned from the best woman I know." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts beating in rhythm after decades of learning each other's patterns. The sun set in shades of orange and gold, painting the sky with the same colors that had witnessed their entire life together. Inside the house, their newest great-grandchild was crying, and they could hear their granddaughter soothing the baby with soft words and a gentle song. The cycle continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love that Jessica and Garrett had established all those years ago. "Do you remember what I told you the day I paid that debt?" Garrett asked. "You said now I owe you nothing, and I meant it. But Jessica, the truth is, we both owe everything to that moment. To the choice we made to trust each other, to build something together, to believe that love could grow from the strangest beginnings. Then I am glad to be in debt to that moment for the rest of my life." She smiled at him. "Because it gave me everything I ever wanted and so much more than I knew to ask for." "Same here, sweetheart. Same here." They continued to sit as the stars came out one by one. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by desperation and advertisement, who had built a love story for the ages. A mail-order bride with debts she could not pay and a cowboy who paid them expecting nothing in return had created something neither of them could have imagined that day in Silver City when their eyes first met. In the end, that was the truth of it. Love was not about debts and payments, about what was owed and what was given. It was about two people choosing each other day after day, building a life one moment at a time, weathering storms and celebrating joys side by side. Jessica and Garrett had learned that lesson well, and they had passed it down through generations. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, but more importantly, The legacy of their love would continue in the hearts and lives of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. As they finally stood to go inside, ready for bed after another long and satisfying day, Garrett paused at the door and pulled Jessica into one more embrace. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For getting off that stagecoach. For taking a chance on me. For building this life with me. For loving me even when you did not have to." "I have always had to," she corrected gently. "From the moment you showed me kindness when you had no reason to, I was already halfway to loving you. The rest was just details." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of 35 years of devotion, and they went inside together to the home they had built, the life they had created, and the love that would outlast them both. In the grand scheme of things, $800 was not very much money. But it had bought something priceless: freedom, trust, and the foundation for a love that would echo through generations. A cowboy had paid a debt and said, "Now you owe me nothing," and in doing so, he had given both of them everything that truly mattered. And every day after, for all the years they had together, they paid that debt forward by loving each other and their family with the same generosity and grace that had started their story. In the end, that was the only accounting that mattered, the only balance sheet worth keeping. They had loved well and been loved in return, and that was worth more than all the money in the world.